Hi, okay, so I'm back here with another example video of the text that we tracked in this car park shot. And what I did in the last video was just put a ramp on it so that rather than being just this plain solid white color, it looked like it was sort of brighter along the top and then it was getting darker towards the bottom. Also duplicated the text to give it a sense of depth, like a little bit of shadowing around the edges. And then we used a solid to create a sort of a false shadow underneath. What I wanted to say is obviously what we can also do is create real shadows and depth through, or the I guess a better composite through the use of lights. So you don't have to just kind of fake it entirely. We can add a light in, and let's just see what happens. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to go layer, new light. So I've looked at lights before when I did the 3D cube exercise, if you had a chance to do that. I'm going to tick cast shadows on there as well, so the light will cast shadows. Okay, I'm just going to go with a spot in this example. Straight away you'll see, like I said, the text just looks better, and the light's probably not even, I say probably, it's not really in the right place. And yet straight away, like I said, turn that off. Yeah, we've got that. Turn the light on and you can see it just looks a lot better. So what you can do is let's jump to 4 views. Now I find obviously with lights and things it gets a little bit more tricky because you might want to be you want to know sort of where the lights are. In this scene though, the thing is there's a lot of light just bouncing around anyway, so I'm just gonna look at putting the light slightly above and sort of, yeah, just in front of the text but looking down on it. So let's move you along. Okay, but just keep that in mind that you can, if you monitor where the lights are coming from, what type of lights they are and things, you can mimic them very closely here in After Effects, and that would work out really well then. Right, so right, let's have a look. I'm going to move you across a bit as well. Now you might find you need, I say you really in this scene need more than one light anyway. There's quite a few in here. I'm just trying to work with one for now in this example. Okay. Right, okay, so I'm just going to go with something like that. Okay, because I just want to get through this one a bit quicker so you can have a bit of a play with it. Alright, so there we go. So we've got our text, and like I said, it looks a lot different now to what I did before. In fact, probably a little bit too dark. In fact, it's starting to blend in a little bit too much, I'd say, with the wall in the background because it needs a little bit more light down here in this corner. However, the reason I did that is because I wanted it to cast a shadow. So what we did before was we used a solid. I just put a big solid underneath the text and just softened it up around the edges and things like that, so it just looked like a big shadow. The problem is it doesn't really look like the type of shadow you might have with the word text. You might want to see those letters individually. A light can let us do that. Now the thing with a light is, what does the shadow cast on it? The computer doesn't recognize a floor as being here. Does that make sense? There's no floor, there's no wall. These things aren't here. It's just one piece of video that's playing in the backdrop. There is nothing there. So we need to give it a floor to actually cast a light onto. So I'm going to go layer, new solid. Okay, and I'll just call it floor. In fact, and I'm going to make sure it's white, and I'll click OK. Oh, in fact, I'll turn those switches off for now. There we go. Right, so yeah, so there's my floor, okay, that I've just created, and I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to make it 3D layer firstly, otherwise the camera won't see it. Well, it will show it up, but it'll just show up as a white box. That's it. It will never see anything else. So I've or interact with it. Camera won't move past it or anything like that. So next thing I need to do, so you see obviously at the moment it's standing upright. There's my text. So I need to then look at rotating it. Look at that. Why is it? There's 3 rotation options. I always seem to get the wrong one. So it's a 90-degree turn. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is just kind of push that back so it goes underneath where the text is. Okay, and again, I want to be using all my views. So again, the text probably isn't that close to the floor. So where's the floor? So I have to kind of figure out where I want that to be. And then also, yeah, so just get that there. And that the shadow will then cast upon that. So I'm going to make that bigger. And you'll see actually that's kind of doing that already. Okay, so this is acting as, like I said, our floor. There we go. And you can see that there is a shadow there. In fact, let's jump back to one view now. So I've done this quite quickly, and there's the word text, and it's kind of coming like that because of the way the light is shining on it. So again, if you don't want it like that, which I totally understand, you might want the text sort of to be slightly over there or just directly underneath it. Adjust the light. Okay, adjust your light position. Okay, and the shadow will move along with it based on where the light is coming from. Okay, so like I said, so you can control that. however you like. Okay, right, so there's a couple options now, because these aren't usually ticked on by default, but I kind of set them on, so I think they've stayed on from last time. With the text, you'd have to go into material options, and you'd want to make sure cast shadows is on. So you can actually turn cast shadows off on any object. So I want light perhaps to hit the text, but I don't want the text to be creating a shadow onto something else. So you can just turn it off. That's a nice thing. Obviously you can't do that in real life with lights, but you can in here. So obviously you want that to be on. You want to make sure, otherwise it's not casting any shadows. But at the same time as well, even the floor that I've just created also has material options because it's 3D, and cast shadows is off because I don't want the floor to be casting shadows, although there's nothing else left for it to cast shadows onto. I'd rather just have it off. But you'll see you've also got accept shadows on. So in other words, if I turn that off, then it'll the light will affect it, but it won't show up any shadows. So you also want to make sure that's on. So there's quite a few options that you can actually switch on and off, which is quite nice. So the other thing is, I guess once we've done that, we've lit the text up and we're like, okay, we've got that lit up. The problem is the text isn't, sorry, the floor isn't something we want to see. All we wanted to really see was the shadow. So we've got to get rid of the floor. So the easiest way to do that is where it says accept lights on, so lights are affecting it. Let's turn that off. So in other words, it accepts shadows, so it will show shadows from other objects, but it won't accept lights. So the light has absolutely no effect on it, hence why it's turning up white, because I made a white solid earlier on. And that was the important part actually, because the reason I made a white solid is because the shadows are dark, they're black. So we've got something that can separate the two now. We've got white and we've got black. The easiest way to do that is to use a blending mode. So you can, underneath you should be able to take toggle switches and modes here. You should have a little button there. Or you can right click a column and say columns and modes. Okay, either way really. And it brings up blending modes. Okay, and you may have seen these before if I just drop that down on things like Photoshop. So there are different ways to basically blend one layer into another. Okay, and you'll find they normally come in groups as well. So you'll see you've got a group here which generally keeps the darken group keeps the darker areas of an image but loses the brighter parts, whereas the add and the lighten will keep the brighter parts of an image but lose the darker bits. So what I want to do with the floor is use say something like a multiply, and what a multiply would do is keep the darker bits, like I said, and lose the brighter parts. So and that way we lose the floor, and now we end up with something with a shadow. I mentioned earlier that obviously the tracking on this wasn't great, so it's pulling back. But again, what I was looking at was just sort of generating that shadow. And like, so if you're shooting something then and you know you're going to composite something in, you could think about where you place lights, how they work, where the virtual object will go, and what kind of shadows you'd expect to see, and then you can try to mimic that effect afterwards. So again, we've got something very similar to what I just did in the previous tutorial, but this time using actual lights instead. So it gives it a slightly different look. The shadows look different. See which one you prefer, or try both. Yeah, it's a good way to get some experience with using lights. Again, you could use multiple lights. All you would have to do, obviously each light, you might be worried, well hang on, each light will cast its own shadow, but again we've got on off switches, so you would just turn cast shadows off for all the other lights. All the other lights would affect the text, but they wouldn't cast, they wouldn't sort of create any shadows from there, so you'd still end up with just one shadow. So it's quite nice the way you can do that. And you can actually play with other light properties as well, which would affect the way the shadows look, because again they're quite harsh right now. So I mentioned in the previous tutorial, you know, look at the way shadows look, and they're not as harsh as this one here. But again, you've got light options. Go into light options, have a look at cone, feather and things like that. The more you feather the light, hopefully that will feather the shadowing as well. I say that and it doesn't seem to be making a massive difference on there, but you know, have a play with some of the, we've got shadow darkness and things. Here we go, so we can play with the darkness of it. We've got shadow diffusion. Okay, there we go. So we can, like I said, there are settings on here that will allow us to adjust the way the shadows look too. All right. So yeah, have some fun playing that and see what you can do.